I ignored those tremors and ignored those tremors. And then the volcano erupted. No, my partner said, I'm leaving. My dad died, I was out of my house. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. Then literally like the physical nature of my life started to disintegrate. And I felt like I was standing in a circular bomb crater, just looking around at all this destruction around me going, this has happened for my good, but it's happened because I didn't take ownership for all those little tremors. I didn't act on them. So now life is saying, well, you've had your time. Now we're going to change this for you because your evolution counts on you going in a new direction from here. So we're going to take care of this for you. This is our gift to you. You might not like the look of it or the feel of it, but it is a gift.
Welcome home to You Are the Compass with producer and host Jessie Clayton. This is a podcast about the turning points in life that awaken us to new directions and the inner guidance that helps us navigate them. Reset your headings as we dive deep with guest interviews, quick fine-tuned series, and inspiration from all corners of the globe. From wherever in the world you have joined from today, you have arrived.
Hi, and welcome home to You Are the Compass. Our coordinates are set to chat with a man without a tie, so to speak. Stay with us here. I feel extremely aligned to how the next guest and I cross paths to bring this message to you all. Ray Martin, welcome home to You Are the Compass.
Wow, what a lovely introduction. And I love the name of your podcast, You Are the Compass. That's a great way of expressing it.
Ray, I'm super excited to be finally sitting down with you. It's been a little while since we first connected.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation too.
Now, when we spoke, I resonated so much with even just the title of your book, Life Without a Tie. There's so many different meanings and avenues, and I'm sure our listeners would agree, have put on a few of those ties themselves over the years, and probably if they're honest with themselves, they likely still do. Can we begin with the start of these revelations, Ray, and delve into the present from there? Where were you at in life in November of 2005?
Yeah, November of 2005, I was just about to get on an aeroplane and go off to Asia. But the backstory for that was that prior to that, I was a successful CEO in London of a company I founded, recipient of the Daily Telegraph Business Leader of the Year award in 2002. So 10 years of hard graft and work with my business partner to build the business up had been given some recognition of a dream I had when I started that company. When the vision I had was just to build a company I was proud of. And that really, put the seal of approval on that publicly. But that cost me a lot, that vision, because I was so focused on achievement and success and material success and comfort and results like that, status driven. I didn't see that some parts of my life were really not working, especially my marriage. And my business partner was the woman I was married to. And so one day, inevitably, she came back from a meeting and said, I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company. It was really sudden, very shocking. I didn't see it coming. And it made me realize that success is not just measured in material success. There's a lot more to it than that. I hadn't really given it that much thought up to that point. And whilst that was going on, as distressing as that was, my father got very ill and he died at around about the same time. And so within 3 or 4 months, I was out of my home, out of my marriage. My dad had died. I was sort of wondering what to do with the company, which was going to be seriously affected by this. And I sort of felt really broken, if I'm honest. And, for about a year, I couldn't really do anything. I was so down and low and feeling like I'd never be happy ever again. And good friends of mine rallied around with support, and a couple have suggested, why don't you take a 6-month sabbatical? And I laughed about that at first, but eventually I did take a 6-month sabbatical. And it was actually, I'll maybe come back to this a bit later, because it was following a visit I made to Australia whilst I was in this very dark period. Because another friend had said, if you're really stuck and you're depressed, you can't see a way forward and it all looks a bit bleak, one thing you can do is find someone who really needs your help and just go and help them 100%. And I had one of my English friends who was now living in Sydney, Australia, and she had breast cancer. So I contacted her and said, how about I just come out for 1 month and look after you and Pete and Matt while you're having your chemotherapy, just be in service to you. She said, yeah, that'd be great. So I did. And at the end of that trip, I went up to Cairns, but I'm going to stop now because I'll spin off into another story about that. But that trip up to Cairns was really the ignition point for the sabbatical, and that's in the book because I won't spoil that for the listeners. But that's really what tipped me over the edge with the idea of taking a sabbatical. So in November 2005, sold my house in London, gave away most of my stuff or sold it, and ended up with a bag of clothes, 22 kilos of luggage, and a laptop, and nothing tying me to being in London any longer. And I left for Asia to start a 6-month quest to find out. The question I was trying to answer from this 6-month sabbatical was framed from a book I read by Bronnie Ware, who's an Australian hospice nurse. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote a really famous book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And in that book, she said she's spoken to thousands of people in the last days and weeks of their life, because that's what she does for a living. And she said, I asked them all the same question. She said, I asked them, what do you most regret about your life? And she said, I can tell you, they all say the same 5 regrets. Doesn't matter whether they were a millionaire or a janitor, always the same 5. What do you think the number 1 regret would be?
I want to say family. That
it's in
they
there.
wish they spent more time with their family, but that wouldn't be the top one.
The way she expressed it, she said, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me.
Ooh,
and when I read that, it kind of was like a gut punch, because I kind of went, oh my God, look, I'm standing in the rubble of my broken life. And I realized that I had been living a life that others expected of me and not the life true to myself. So I was very competent at it, but I was not happy or fulfilled in being in that life. And I sort of realized that this was an opportunity to have a major reset. I didn't have kids when I was married. And it was an opportunity for me to just go off for 6 months and have a bit of a deep reflection and a major reset and answer the question, what does living life true to myself look like for me specifically? What would that mean? What would that look like? What would that sound like, feel like? How do I answer that question? So that's why I left with that quest.
I think it's very prevalent throughout society these days to be living lives that we thought we wanted when we grew up. All the society's pressures, family pressure, work pressure, parent pressure, even, back in the day as what they envisioned for you.
Yeah. And even now, media pressure. Because media and social media give us these images and stories of other people's lives every minute, suggesting that the life we have is not good enough, not right enough, not correct enough, not best, whatever it is, And so, I think that pressure is enormous, absolutely enormous. And I really wanted the opportunity to see if I could find out what was true for me.
And in those 6 months, Ray, was there a pivotal moment where you realized 6 months was just not enough?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, because I realized after 4 or 5 months at being a traveler that not much on the inside had changed for me. I was on the outside in a beautiful environment. I was wearing shorts and flip-flops and T-shirts. So it all looked relaxed. Anyone observing me would have thought, oh, that guy's really great, happy, he's free, he's got no ties, no obligations. Well, I'd like that life. On the inside, I was feeling frightened about the future. I was feeling a lot of guilt and shame about having failed in my marriage. I was feeling guilt and shame about having exited the workforce. I wasn't a tax-paying citizen, and everyone else, all my friends back home, were all working really, really hard. And I'd somehow managed to escape, and I felt guilty about that. I had no purpose, no routines, nothing to get up for in the morning, so I had to invent something. I started writing a blog just to give myself some sort of connection to purpose and meaning and stay connected with people I knew. And so, I had a lot of anxiety, and I was describing this once about 5 months in to a fellow traveller, and he said, while you're here, why don't you do a Vipassana meditation retreat? And I said, what's that? I never had any idea what that was. He said, well, it's a lot of Buddhist monasteries in Asia and lots in Thailand. You can go into the monastery as a guest and you sit with the monks for 10 days and meditate in silence, and they teach you some of the Dharma teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and it helps you get deep insight into your own mind and life. And it could be a life-changing experience for you. I sort of just felt tingles in my body, I just felt this. I just had this feeling that as he was speaking, that that was really calling me. I had no idea what I would be like. I really was going into complete unknown to say yes. I've never been silent for 10 minutes, let alone 10 days. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went to a place called Suratani, Swan Muck Dharma Heritage Centre, and signed up for the next course, which started a couple of days later. And I did that 10 days, and it was life-changing, Jesse. It just completely and utterly changed my inside state. As if I had a round knob on the side of my head for the volume of noise in my head. It was 10 out of 10 when I went in, and it was as if someone had, probably while I was asleep or something, had turned the volume down. So when I left, it was like 1 out of 10. And it was just lovely. I felt serene. I felt calm. I had clarity of vision for the next part of life ahead. I didn't need to answer some of the questions I'd been laboured with. I saw my own mind and how troublesome that was. I saw how much thinking I did that wasn't helpful. And that has been a life change. My life's never been the same since that moment, actually, around mindfulness. I've had a mindfulness practice now for nearly 20 years, and it's really changed how I live.
I think that was instantaneous when you went there, or did it eventuate over the next couple of days?
Oh, it eventuated over the next period, more than even a couple of days, because after I came out of the monastery, that was when to answer your question, I realised 6 months wasn't enough. I thought, now that I've understood and I've gained this awareness of what mindfulness is and how much of our lives is determined by what we think on the inside and not what happens on the outside, that's almost irrelevant. Now that I've got this awareness, I want to cultivate it. I want to develop it. I want to work on it. And so I decided to stay in Asia for 6 more months in a place called Chiang Mai, and joined a mindful community and sat and meditated every week with this mindful community, so I could actually consciously develop this new practice I had. And during that period, I made friends with people on a similar path of inquiry that I was on. So I decided to stay longer because I really enjoyed the connection I had with that community. And then things started to happen as a result of being in that community, which I didn't expect. So I went to an elephant sanctuary up there and saw what amazing work they were doing, rescuing the elephants and taking care of them. And I went to an orphanage in Nepal while I was trekking in the Himalayas and ran a picnic for 60 orphan kids, and I saw the joy that brought. And all of these events were giving me a sense of my heart opening and thinking, I'm here, I've got my business skills and my life experience, I've got time on my hands, I'm not sure what my future is, but I can help these people while I'm here. And I thought, what could I do to help? What could I do? And I didn't know. And then I met a guy who was travelling in Chiang Mai who'd run 6 marathons. He was 10 years younger than me. And I asked him about what running a marathon involved. And as he spoke about it, I got that same tingling excitement in my body that when the guide'd spoken about the Vipassana. And I realised 2 things as I listened. One was I realised there's a different way of feeling and listening to life, because I now notice the same body sensations and the same kind of intuition or wisdom arising from deep in me as I listened. And that was kind of guiding me in a way my brain doesn't work that way. And I also realized that by running these marathons, I could raise money through sponsorships and support that I could actually use to give that to them. And I asked him, could I run a marathon? Did he think I could run a marathon? And he looked at me and said, well, you look quite fit, Ray. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I know why you want to do this. If you want to do this, you stay here for 6 months in Chiang Mai, and I will train you. I'll coach you and put a program together. And I'll get you ready for your first marathon in 6 months. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And whilst we were training together, I applied in the ballot to get a place in the New York Marathon, because I'd been there a couple of years earlier and I'd watched the end of the race in Central Park. And I thought in my mind at the time, God, I'm never going to run a marathon in my life, but if I ever did, I'd want to run this one because it's the best in the world. And when I told Matt Campbell, his name is, when I told Matt that was my dream, he said, well, put your name in the ballot, see what happens. And I got a place first time, literally within a week. And I treat those things now as what I call them confirmation signals. because when you make these tough decisions in life, often we want a way of saying, Lord, am I making the right decision, or whatever it is.
100%.
Am I really doing the right thing here? Is this right? And I had a similar experience when I came to Australia to look after my friend. I went up to Cairns, and what happened there was I got invited to audition for a play at the Rondo Theatre in Cairns. I'm not an actor. I'd had no experience whatsoever, but my friend Julie thought it would be good for me because she knew what was going on in the background of my life. But I only had 3 days left before I had to go back to England and do all this kind of coaching and consulting work I was meant to do to pay my mortgage. But she said, well, go to the audition for fun. And I said, okay. So I went to the audition. I threw myself into it 100%. And at the end of the auditions, the director came over and said, so what's your situation? Do you really live here? I said, yeah, of course I do. I didn't tell him I was going home. I said, when are you going to decide who you want in the play? And he said, about a week's time. I thought, oh, no, I'm going to be back in England. But I thought, I'll wait and see what they say. So when I landed back in Heathrow in London, my friend Julie called me and said, Wayne's been on the phone. They want you in the play. I said, okay, tell me. It's probably one line a night, parts, very small. I said, what part do they want me to play? She said, they want you to play the part of George, who was the central comedic character of the entire play. And when I read the script, he had 400 lines in the script. He was on stage for an hour and a half. He was the character that the whole story revolved around, a fumbling, sort of foppish, idiot kind of guy. Comedy, it was a comedy. And they said, they want you to play him. And my sister-in-law's an actress in England, professional. So I took the script to her and I told her this story. And I said, do you think I could do this? I've got no experience. She looked at it. She said, yeah, I think there's a way you could probably do this if you wanted. And so I was now in this dilemma. The universe had opened up a crack. And it said, Ray, this is a growth opportunity. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you that could change your life if you do this. And also at the same time, I had 4 or 5 clients in London who I'd given my word I would be available to help and work with, and I needed the money. And I couldn't say no to that either. So I was in this fork and real dilemma. So I thought, I need a confirmation signal if I choose to do the play, that it's the right thing. I mean, the right thing at the meta level, not the immediate level. Yes. And I thought, what would that confirmation signal be? So I had to invent one. I thought, I know what it is. I'm going to make phone calls to each of these clients I've obligated myself to. And I'm not going to lie or fudge or make up a story or anything. I'm just going to tell them this, what I'm telling you now. I'm going to tell them the whole story about my divorce and the trip and getting offered a part in the play. And I'm going to ask them if they'd let me go with their blessing and postpone the work for 3 months I would need to do with them. And if all 4 say, yeah, I give you my blessing, I would definitely go, then that's my confirmation signal. And if some of them don't, even one of them doesn't, I'm staying. And that's what happened. So I had those 4 conversations. They all said, go with my blessing. And so I went back to Australia and I did that play. And it was brilliant. It really was life-changing. 3 months I lived the life of someone else, like a completely different person and character.
With having those confirmations, even though they were resting on someone else's morals, on thoughts, feelings, or perceptions of what you were doing, that you'd already devised with such conviction that this is what you wanted to do, that they could kind of see it in themselves?
It's possible. That's a good question. That's a really good question. I'll probably never know the answer to that, but it didn't matter at the time because what I needed was something that felt like a solid confirmation inside me. And it gave me that thing. It gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I know this is probably a bit wild, a bit reckless, a bit irresponsible financially, and all of those things. It was wrong for all the right reasons, but it felt absolutely right for my soul. And I knew it, and I knew that feeling because I'd felt that feeling before, but never really paid attention to it when I was a businessman. And certainly never, I had that feeling when I was in the marriage and that wasn't working and ignored it. So I'd overridden that feeling a lot in my life. And I thought, this time I am not going to override this. I am going to be true to myself, like Bronnie Ware was saying. I'm going to honor myself and do what feels true for me. Even if everyone thinks I'm an idiot, I'm still going to do it. And that's how it was, and that's what happened. And it was the right decision because it took my life down a path, which is the path I'm now on. And I love my life to bits.
So you went to Cairns to do the play?
Yeah, did the play, was there. George Pigden played it for 2 weeks. The run was every night and one matinee, I think, as well. Got standing ovations every night and got lots of press coverage. And I loved it, and I absolutely loved it. And I got on the plane to fly home after those 3 months, and I noticed I felt a lot of dread in my body. I was going back to England to resume my normal life, but I was thinking, no, I don't really want to be Ray the businessman anymore. I so don't like it compared to this life. And then suddenly you had this epiphany. I went, oh my God, Ray the businessman is a character like George Pigden.
Yes.
It's not me. And I think that was what the gift was from that experience, because I never thought of my life as a businessman as playing a character. I just thought I was that guy. I couldn't separate Ray and that character. They were one and the same. So it meant I'd had to do it for the rest of my life. And now I saw, no, I don't. I can choose to be a different character. Or I can choose to kill off the series completely, just because Tony Robbins, the coach in America, he says, you're not just the actor in your story, you're the director and the script writer too. And you can rewrite the script, you can direct the scenes differently, or you can completely kill off the series. I thought, I'm going to kill off the series. And I decided, literally, as I got back to England, I'm going to sell my house in London, and I'm going to get rid of my stuff, and I'm going to be a traveller and a nomad for a while, as long as I feel like I want to.
And this was in sort of the start of 2006?
Yeah, end of November 2004 was when I finally cleared everything and went, because during that period of doing the play and kind of getting the house ready to be sold, I'd started dating someone in London, and she was travelling to Thailand. And when I first met her, she said, like the very first night I met her, Annie, her name is, she says, well, these stories are all in the book. Nice to meet you. She said, yeah, it's nice to meet you. But she kind of said, well, don't get too interested because I'm going off to Thailand in a couple of weeks. I'm not living in England anymore. And I said, well, okay, great. Well, let's just talk until you go. And when she said, I'm off now, I said, great, have a nice life. Good to have bumped into you, sort of thing. But when I got back from Australia after all those months, she was still in London. And I came, what are you still doing in London? I can't believe you're still here. She said, I had a couple of problems with the flat that I was going to rent out. I had to get it fixed. It took a bit longer. She said, by the way, since you were away, I was thinking, maybe you might want to come traveling with me, I said, wow, really? Really? I didn't think you thought like that. She said, yeah, maybe. She said, I just don't think we know each other well enough to make that kind of decision. And I said, yeah, you're right. I think that's true. I said, well, I've just put my house on the market. I reckon it will take 2 or 3 months to sell it. Why don't you just come and move into my house? We'll have a sort of crash course relationship. And we'll know, because my wisdom suggested that. It wasn't a head suggestion. I thought she's right. Yeah. This would be a way we could find out how compatible we are. So she moved into my house and we lived together for like 8 or 10 weeks while the house was being sold. And then she went off to Thailand, but we'd planned to travel together. And that's when we agreed we would do that. And I went and joined her in Thailand when I got there.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that's
what happened. So you did the trip to Thailand, and then...
Yeah. Well, it started in Thailand. I had my first 4 or 5 months of the Life Without a Thai journey in Thailand, going seeing the whole country. And then after we did the Vipassana retreat, we went to Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, all over Asia. We spent a year just backpacking and ended up in Perth in Australia for Christmas of 2006 to be with Annie's family. And so that was the first sort of year and a half of that journey, was as a tourist, really.
What do you think opened you up more to each place that you travelled through? So you did the meditation with the monks, and then you've had all these revelations. Yeah. Where does that go to from there?
The answer that's coming to me that I'd like to talk a bit about is what I call presence, because doing the meditation, what that did for me was enable me to see that my life is happening in this moment right now. Like you and me, we're in this conversation. This is life. Nothing else matters right now. This is the only thing that's really happening here. And so I was fully present, probably for the first time ever, in what was going on a daily basis. And when you're fully present, you don't miss anything. You don't miss these little cues that life sends you. Life sends you lots of little keys, and there's little keyholes all over the place. If you put the key in and open it, some new insight comes, or some new thought, or some new invitation to do something you'd never have thought of. And so that was what was happening. You know, it was kind of that the mindfulness has given me a grounding in presence. And I realized I spent a lot of my time in my life. I know it's the same for other people. My body's in the room, but my thoughts are either in the past, ruminating on what's already happened and replaying conversations that didn't go well, or things that I don't like, or something, just replaying events over and over. So I'm physically with you having dinner, but half of me is in the past. Or I'm physically having dinner with you and half of me is thinking about this big pitch I've got to do in a couple of days' time, or somebody I've got to meet who I don't get on with and it's worrying me, or some financial disaster coming over the horizon or something. So I'm thinking about that. So I'm never fully in the moment I'm in. And I started to consciously practice being fully in the moment I was in all the time. And that just meant people would talk to me in a way that I could hear differently. And then someone might say, do you want to come and join us for that? And I'd feel into the wisdom of it and go, as you asked me, I feel good in my body listening. Yeah, I'll say yes. I would never normally said yes, because the old Ray would, oh no, I've got a plan. I've got a plan to do this, and that plan's fixed. So anything else that comes up, I just have to ignore. You know, so this was massively changing for me, but it was also changing because I didn't have any obligations really, apart from writing the blog. That was the only one I gave myself.
It's funny you say like obligations though, because I feel we'll all have them from time to time.
We do. Yeah.
I think it's
they're all
about
negotiable.
They are, and weaving them in and out of being present, because we are only fearing what the future might lead based on past experiences. So we're currently bringing into the present what we've already experienced, and probably, you know, what we don't want to go through again. So we try and filter out those experiences and connections and relationships. And then what we don't really understand is that's future projecting certain things that we would say no to or open ourselves up to in fear of that happening again.
Yeah. It's not just fear, though, I would say, because I can remember times where my future thinking is hope and excitement. Like when you start a new relationship, your future thinking is all about how great it's going to be. But you're still not in the present moment. You're just distracted by your thinking in a different way. But it's still not present. So it can be both. It's not necessarily fear-driven, although a lot of it is.
How do you deal with that, Ray? Like, what's your number one tip?
Well, I was taught by my teachers, first of all, come back to my breath. So while I'm noticing I'm having those thoughts about the future, I just have to redirect my attention to my breathing for a few seconds, not long. Just take a couple of breaths. So that's now broken that chain of thinking for a second. And then I'm in my body. And then I can say, is what I'm thinking right now the most helpful thinking to be having? You know, is it 100% true, or is it helpful? And then usually the answers to both of those is no. And I can say, right, then I'm just going to sit here and be in this moment and enjoy it for what it is and not think about this till tomorrow.
How do you decide when to move on from a place? I know we said you'll sit with the decision for a little while, all these different places, and I'm sure it lasted a lot longer than the 6 months that you first envisioned.
Yeah.
Do you just sit with that decision and be like, yep, that feels good, I'm going to go to Laos or Cambodia, or where else has the journey sort of taken you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer to me is when it feels right. So an example of that was when I eventually created a base in Chiang Mai because I loved it there so much. So between, say, 2009 and 2014, I mostly lived there. I was still traveling, going on trips, but in between trips, I'd return to Chiang Mai because I left half my things there. You know, I had a room there, which I could keep. And then I met a lady from Poland, and we got involved, connected romantically. and she was just there on a holiday. This was 2014. But the next year I had a place to run in the London Marathon, because I ran 5 marathons in total to raise about $50,000 for my foundation that I started. And I wrote the story, all of those things in the book. And people are interested in that. It's all in there. And what happened. But when I was training for the London Marathon and Marta came to the city, we started a relationship. Of course, she had to go back to Poland and I stayed in Thailand. So for 2 years, we spent a couple of months in each person's city with 2 or 3 months gap in between, because we both had other things we were doing and she had to work. And, so we had a long distance relationship for 2 years. But then at that point, it felt right for me to move to Warsaw, Poland. So I did. I lived there for 3.5 years. But I had to wait a couple of years to know it felt exactly right.
And then also when to go as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like my sort of journey at the minute, I'm in this new place, and when I was leaving Sydney last week, I didn't get that excited feeling that I would normally get getting on a plane. You go somewhere new, because I've realized that you need to sort of feel those feelings. You need to be present. And if you haven't really questioned those feelings, if you haven't really delved into what they might mean for you at this point in your life, then they're going to come back no matter how far you journey off and trek off into the world.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think knowing what your own values are helps a lot, because I did a lot of work on myself during the time I was living nomadically to gain a deep level of self-awareness. It started with the Vipassana, but then I did loads of workshops, read lots of books, went to Plum Village, which is a beautiful monastery in France where Thich Nhat Hanh lives with all of his monks. And he passed away a couple of years ago, but he, for me, was probably the most profound teacher I've had in my life. I've learned a lot from him and his retreats and his books. And so I was doing lots of things to deepen my own self-awareness. And so I started to realize that for me, being part of community is something extremely important to me. And it was sort of deep in my subconscious initially. I sort of knew it, but didn't really acknowledge it, how important it was. And so that then started to drive my decisions, because if your values are things like community, integrity, freedom, love is one of my values. If you're aware of those values, then every choice that comes to you, do you want to come and do this? How does that line up with my values? Is it going to enhance my sense of community? Will it be in alignment with the value of love I hold? And if you get a yes in alignment to all those values, you can go, that's a really good decision for me. But if you get a no to a couple of them, you think, I'm not sure about this. It doesn't line up. Even though it looks attractive for 1 or 2 reasons, it doesn't line up. So I maybe I'll consider that.
Yes,
I do. I definitely think they do. Yeah, when I look at my values as a 30-year-old guy, driven, ambition, success, and all that stuff, and now as someone in his 60s, my values are quite different, but the core ones are not. So I've always had the value of freedom and integrity. Those 2 things are vitally important, have been since I was a kid. Freedom, I mean freedom to be original in your thinking, to express who you are, freedom to speak your truth. That's what I really mean by that. And integrity is like, doing what you say and keeping your promises and agreements and doing the right thing when it's called for by others. Just that sense of rightness. That really bugs me when I don't do it for myself and I want to see other people not doing that. That really, that gets me going. So I know those things are critical.
We have to do that for ourselves first and foremost, don't we? We have to have that self-love to have
definitely.
That filter out.
Exactly. You can see it in the world of politics when people are acting out of self-interest and they're not acting out of what's good for the citizens of the people that elected them.
Greater community.
Yeah, they're just not in service to the public. They're in service to themselves. And we see that everywhere. It's just,
How do you think values and boundaries differ?
Yes, a really good question. That's a really good question. Let me give that a moment because I see them as different. So for me, values, love, freedom, integrity, exploration, I use those to navigate like your compass. It's a great word. Those are my compass on how I navigate and reflect on and evaluate decisions I'm making. Boundaries is where you sort of draw the line with the world outside, and boundaries relate to others. So I can say to you, if we're going to work together on a project, Jesse, I hold the value of integrity very highly. So if you've got any habit of not doing things you say, or you're quite casual with breaking agreements, we're not going to get on. And that's a boundary for me. And being
it's kind
honest
of like
about
meeting
mistakes.
in the middle of the fence, in the middle of the boundary fence.
Exactly. And being honest about any screw-ups. I don't mind screw-ups, but you've got to bring them and own them and be honest about them as they happen. I don't want them hidden, because that's a boundary for me. Things like
100%.
that.
I feel
So
like that very much aligns at the workplace, with people when they're at an interview and you've got the boss, you've got the potential employee. It's sat, between desks, and you try and align your values to their boundaries, and you meet in the middle and you have these discussions, and then you keep working for the same boss, even though your values might have, shall I say, got stomped on in the middle of the contract.
Yeah. I mean, sadly, it does happen, doesn't it? Our values do get violated, in life.
What advice would you give to an individual going through that, whether it's life or work life, personal life?
Yeah, and the first step is always to be honest with oneself, because, we deceive ourselves more than we deceive anyone else that's alive. So that's the first step, get to a point of being honest with yourself. This is what's going on. This is my need, and I'm not having that need met. What do I do about that? So it will always involve another person. So then you have to consider whether or not you're willing to have what I call the courageous conversation. And you have to talk to that other person and say, I want to have a conversation with you where I share with you what I'm thinking and feeling, because it's not something here in our dynamics not working. I'd like to see how you feel about it and ask you if you might do a couple of things that would help me, and see where we go.
What would you say to people that think that they've done that, but might be doing it too often? So they're not staying the course, and they're like, well, you don't align with me anymore. Where's the line between too much and not enough?
I guess to me, it's a bit like saying, if you're a Reiki treatment practitioner or something, when do you stay working on one part of the body and move to the next? Yeah. You have to sense it. You have to feel into it. It's a feeling. It's not an outside measure. And I think it's the same in relationship. We all know if that relationship that we're challenged by or sort of struggling in is one we want to evolve. And we know that can be contingent on the other person's willingness to participate in that shared journey of evolution as well. Because if you're both aligned like that, then it helps a lot. But if one person isn't, then at some point, it probably is necessary to say, this isn't a lot. I love you and you're great, but this isn't going to take me where I need to go. And I can't see any way of continuing this journey. How does that feel when I say that? I think anyone who thinks that they know the answers to these things probably is misled, because even if you've had an experience personally, it's never the same for someone else who filters life through their own values and their own perceptions. So I find it not that helpful to give advice like that. But all I can say is, if you are true to yourself, this is what I've learned, and you are sensing into and using your compass in life and being honest about it, and having the courage to express that in words to another person as you feel it and think it, and not trying to dress it up or be polite or nice. Not necessarily be unkind, but be straight. Like Brené Brown, who's a brilliant teacher.
I love Brené Brown. Right?
She says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So being clear with another human being is the kindest thing you can do. And I think I hold to that. I think that's a good benchmark.
She does a great little segment on empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
And that really sort of resonated with me, and a lot of the advice I give people, or if people come to me wanting a tip on something or just a bit of alignment, I'm like, well, is it coming from an empathy perspective, or is it coming from a sympathy, or what I've done in your situation kind of thing? Ray, I
Yeah.
love how we're going off on a little compass headings and
That's all right.
drawing
That's all
analogies.
right. Let's keep,
Let's follow this. Was there a pivotal moment, I guess, on your compass when you realized that you were living someone else's dream, or rather idea of success?
I'd had twinges of it throughout my decade as a CEO, because I remember feeling like, God, this just doesn't feel like it's me. Even though I was very competent at it for some reason. I'm the sort of person who's like, give me a job to do, I'll do it to the best of my ability. Whether I like it or not, I will give it my best shot. And I was able to do that. And I was married to my partner who owned half the company Vision with me. And we were married and I loved her, so I wanted to do a good job, for her as well. It was all the right reasons. But I described this feeling in the book as seismic tremors on registering on a graph. That there's graphs that measure the volcanic activity at the core of the earth, and they're mostly just trickle measures like this. And then suddenly there's a spike, and then there's trickle, spike, like this. And so I described this period
like
over
a lie detector, right?
Yeah. So on certain occasions, exactly. We might go to a certain event, or I might have one conversation with someone, and I suddenly have a thing and go, "Oh, this life doesn't feel right. I need to do something about this." But no, I'm not going to do anything about it because there's nothing I can do. And it's a very affluent life. We get really well paid. We're in a lovely, comfortable home, and I've got all the trappings of success, and I don't really want to give those up. So I'm just going to carry on and hope it gets better. That's basically what I was doing for a long time. And then when I ignored those tremors, then the volcano erupted. No, my partner said, I'm leaving. My dad died, I was out of my house. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. Then literally like the physical nature of my life started to disintegrate. And I felt like I was standing in a circular bomb crater, just looking around at all this destruction around me going, this has happened for my good, but it's happened because I didn't take ownership for all those little tremors. I didn't act on them. So now life is saying, well, you've had your time. Now we're going to change this for you because your evolution counts on you going in a new direction from here. So we're going to take care of this for you. This is our gift to you. You might not like the look of it or the feel of it, but it is a gift. And so that's how I saw it. Yeah, it is. And I always say, as my view, I think you either take ownership yourself or eventually life's going to decide for you. And you might not like the way that life deals with it, but that's tough because you opted out when you had the chances.
I kind of say that myself and with my own story, like you either have that big epiphany, that light bulb moment in yourself, or life decides for you. You have a major health scare or something happens as it did in your case, or it's built up over time. So little bit by little bit, all those little inclinations, all those things that were consciously around you, but maybe your subconscious couldn't take on, that gets built up over time. And suddenly it's like that event was the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
So in your year of, sort of like a woe is me kind of analogy, if you will, and the guy coming to you and saying, why don't you just go and give your help to someone else who needs it more? What made you listen to that? Had you already received other advice from people that might have gone through similar situations? Or was it just like, this feels right?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. I was really, really down, having very dark thoughts. I really couldn't see any step forward in the life I was sitting in. And so when someone said, just exit your life for a month and go and 100% focus on someone else, I thought that's the best suggestion I've had in the last 12 months. I'll take it, because what have I got to lose? I'll see where that leads. Plus, I get to see my good friend in Australia, of course. That was, also appealing. And spend a month in Sydney, which is always delightful. So I thought, why not? I'll take that. I just hope that it puts a crack in this darkness somehow. I wasn't sure if it would or not. And I've got to say, honestly, after a month of being with her, when my time finished there, I left. I was in exactly the same funk I was in when I arrived. I had the same doubts, fears, same mental pressure. Nothing had changed. I'd obviously put it to one side to do what I needed to do there. But I thought to myself, I'm really honest, God, that bit of advice was crap. It never worked. But what I didn't realise at the time, now I can see looking back, is that, yeah, the advice was, if you go into service to someone else, surely something will change in your environment, but it might take a few months. It won't be immediate necessarily. I didn't know this. I thought, oh, it will happen immediately. This is how I heard it, but it didn't. And it was after I finished the play, which I would never have gone to that play if I hadn't gone to Australia. So there was a connection. But it was only when I was coming back after being in the play, which was probably about 5 months after I'd been with Elizabeth in Sydney, that insight, that massive insight, Ray the businessman is a character, because that was the life-changing insight. That was the thing that changed my entire life. That was the pivotal moment. And that came as a result of going to Australia to look after her and going on to do that. So, but it took 5 months to come to the surface, let's say.
I still like that piece of advice was the little spark, and
yes.
Then being up in Cairns and having that light bulb moment was what we call the catalyst for everything else. We are just all characters in our own stories. And
correct.
We are the director, we're the producer. We often fund all these stories and slowly add characters, and then one character that's, a main character in your life might become a lesser part for a while, and then they come back in other little stories that you create and resonate with. I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor someone shared with me was, your life is like a series of books on a shelf with different parts of your story emphasized in each one. And so you've got this shelf full of books of who you have been. And, you're adding new ones to it all the time. You are. And you can go back and pick up an older part of yourself sometimes and re-dip into it if you want,
Ooh, that's very philosophical.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I like that metaphor.
That book.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can see, like right now, there are parts of who I was in my 20s and 30s that are sometimes useful in some moments I'm in now. But majority not. But like, I don't have any kind of massive driving ambitions like I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. Now I sort of feel like if I go to sleep at night and I think on the day and I say, have I been kind today? Have I contributed? Have I shown up in the best way I could as a human being? And I can answer that, yes, I'm 100% happy. That is my peace and happiness, is that question, rather than, did I get my revenue target? Did we make the quarterly profit? Did I do all these things I used to measure my happiness on, which was valid in that phase of my life, because when you're in your 30s and you're building an empire and you're building your capital, you need to be target driven. So I'm not saying that's not a good thing. I don't want anyone listening to think I'm poo-pooing it. It's just that certain things work in certain phases, but you don't need to keep doing them. We're fluid.
That's sort of in a work sense. And, I find quite often leaders talk about having impact with their workplace, with their colleagues, with their company, though they still wish to be present and somehow pursue a passion. How would you go about that? Like, does that change over the years? We can't all have, in our 30s, have this wake-up call. We might already be at the end of our careers, and we've led this life. We're still married to an extent. I don't know if it's happy or it's whatever people are going through at the minute. But how do they still be present in that life while pursuing a passion?
It's a great question. I love it because it touches into a man I greatly admired when he was alive. He died as well a couple of years ago. So Ken Robinson, who used to teach this, he talked about being in your element, which is when you've got these things you're naturally good at, your God-given talents, things that just other people say, oh, it looks so easy when you do it. It comes naturally to you, whatever that is. And then you've got things in the world that you really care about, what you're passionate about. And when these two things intersect, you're working in your element, because you could do that all day, every day, 24 hours. You'd never run out of energy. You just get more energy. So it's anyone who's lived in that zone, which I have some from time to time, and worked in that place, you can say, honestly, it doesn't feel like work. I get paid, I'll go to work, but this doesn't even feel like work. I love what I do. I mean, I couldn't do enough of it. I feel like as a leadership coach right now, I get to do the work I love to do. And so I get energized by it. And I feel like it's connected to who I am and my purpose for being here. So this is really important, to try and do the deep reflection, do the inner inquiry that leads one to know what puts me in my element. What are the things that I'm naturally good at, or things I remember from childhood that I used to love doing? What are the things I really care about, and how do I make those intersect? Now, for some people, it can be a really small thing. Like, I remember coaching a senior executive in a financial services company in London who's really into that's her career. But one of the passions she had was teaching yoga. And so she thought those two worlds don't intersect. I said, don't they? I said they could. So she started doing a weekly lunchtime class for colleagues, teaching them yoga. That thing was oversubscribed within 1 week. And then she did 2 and more. And it just sort of grew from there. And she started to bring her passion into her career and integrate the two. So that's a small way of doing it. And they had another guy who, I think he worked for DHL or something like this, a logistics manager, but he had an autistic son. And he wanted to find swim lessons for his autistic son. And he couldn't find any in the county he lived in. And so in his own time, spare time, he learned to become a swim instructor and qualified in it, and then started teaching his son himself. And then other parents went, oh my God, you teach autistic kids. My kid's autistic. Could you teach him as well? That guy's now got a full-time business doing autistic swimming. So his purpose sort of found him through his own journey. I've got loads of stories like this. We could talk all day, but this is why living in alignment is so critical, because it's my observation from my own life and others I've seen at first hand. When you start living in alignment with what's true for you, with what your values are, with what your purpose is, with what puts you in your element, with what empowers you, and what your driving forces and needs are that get met. When you live in alignment with all those things, the world just starts configuring differently. It starts bringing to you the people and situations that you need to continue your journey. And there's a sense of ease about it, which you never have in the other way of living. The other way of living is you're pushing into life, and it's all a bit of an effort and a struggle. And you're reliant on a lot of other contacts and connections helping you. But when you're living in alignment, you sort of feel this sense of ease. It's like having a windbreak around you that just cuts all the turbulence and noise out, and it just sails through. It's hard to describe, but I genuinely have experienced this. It's like, do you want another example where this is applied?
Yeah. 100%.
Because I remember after I finished the fundraising for the first marathon in New York, it was 2010. I was living in Asia, as you know. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I've done this 2-year project to raise all this money from the marathon. I've dispensed all the cash. I went back to Nepal with the money. I went to the elephant sanctuary and spent the money getting it used to build things. I thought, wow, what should I do now? And I felt my wisdom went, well, you're ready to put your toe back in the business world. Now, 5 years out, no salary. I was running out of money a little bit as well. And I thought, I'd like to do some coaching work in Asia. But, I didn't know a single business person in the whole of Asia. I didn't know a company or anything. I mean, I literally knew nothing. I was on LinkedIn. So I went onto LinkedIn and I put Coaching Asia in the search box. And sure enough, a load of profiles of coaches in Asia came up. So I just randomly picked 2. And I sent them a message saying, I've just moved to Asia. I'd like to do some part-time coaching. Who do you suggest I get in contact with first? And they both said the same. But there's the best guy definitely is a guy called Warapat. He's in Bangkok. He's president of the Asia Pacific Alliance. Okay, he knows everyone and he'll steer you right. So I wrote to him and he said, yeah, I think I could help you. Are you coming to Bangkok? And luckily I was. So a week later I met him in person and I told him my story, this story we've heard today, who I was. And I said, it's embarrassing to admit, Warapat. I said, but I only really want to work about 20 hours a month. I don't really want to work much. I felt embarrassed even saying it, but I thought, no, I need to be true to myself. I'm not going to pretend I want to work hard or something. He said, I think of 1 or 2 people. And he sent my profile out He said, have you got a profile? That's the thing. Have you got a profile of yourself? I said, yeah, I didn't. So that night in my hotel, I made one up, sent him it. And the next day or the day after, I got a call from a lady called Danielle Marchant from Singapore. She said, we've just started this agency doing executive coaching. Now, another thing I'd said to Warrapat, before I tell you this, I said, I want to work 20 hours a month. I told him all the embarrassing things I didn't want to admit. I want to work 20 hours a month. I don't even want to do it in person. I'd rather do it on Skype. Because in 2010,
Yeah.
Skype, the only reason I used Skype was to call my mum. No one was working virtually. I said, do you know what? I'd really like to coach people on Skype because I don't want to buy loads of business clothes and get on planes. I'd rather do it from Chiang Mai, at my own time. And I said, but I don't know anyone who's doing that. So 2 days later, I got a call from this lady, Danielle Marchant, who said, we've got your profile from Warrapat. We have got plenty of clients that are signing up, but we just don't have enough coaches. We will take every one of those 20 hours a month, more if you want, but we definitely want to use those 20 hours a month that you've got. She said, but Ray, I need to tell you something. I don't think you're going to like it. I said, what's that? She said, well, we're going to be different. We're only going to do the coaching over Skype. We're not doing it face to face. I said, you are kidding me. You are kidding me. Like, in the whole of Asia, the haystack called Asia, I got this needle and I found in 2 steps one company that was going to coach over Skype the kind of clients I could do a really good job for. And they wanted me desperately. And you couldn't make that up. I mean, it was literally scientifically so impossible. I was there, and then within a week I was working, doing that. And I mean, it was like, talk about effortless. I mean, I met one guy and did it was like, I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah. It's like your boundaries that you had set with what you wanted to do moving forward to get the dollars coming in aligned so much with your values. In your conviction, you said, this is what I'd like to do. Can we make it happen? And then the universe just starts dropping that in there.
You think so, but it's a caveat is if you're living true to yourself.
Yes.
Because that system can't be manipulated. You can't sort of pretend you care, but you don't really.
Yeah.
You actually really have.
Well,
I get that often.
So long.
Yeah, for a short while.
Yeah.
I had that. I was in a workshop the other day with the clients, and I gave them an example of how you might frame a conversation with someone who's challenging to manage. And they said, well, that sounds really good, Ray. It sounds like you really care, when you put it like that. He said, I don't think I could sound like that. I said, yeah, but you have to actually care. You can't, there's no technique to sound like you care. You just got to care. And then you sound like that.
100%.
And the penny dropped for that person,
I love that. You're able to open people up to different ways of thinking. Ray, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we might have to get you back on for another chat. Okay. I think you probably already said it, but I'll make it more specific. If you could give your childhood self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Torn here because there's a rational answer and a sort of soul answer. The rational answer would have been practical, like invest financially wisely for your future. Because I blew a lot of money when I was up to I was like 30s. Never did invest wisely. That's the rational answer. But the soul answer would be really, really follow what's true for you. That's the only really way to go. Find your own true path and don't be persuaded or swayed by the noise or the pressure to conform. It will really serve you well, and you will have an extraordinary life if you really genuinely follow what feels true for you, as long as it's good for everyone else. Because that's the caveat. You can't follow what's true for you if it's the cost is to everyone else. It's got to be beneficial to everyone else as well.
First and foremost with you, but then you've got to fact check that and resonate that with your outside world, your outside characters.
I'd say so. It's opening up a big conversation because I generally don't think life is an equal playing field in every case. So that has to be factored in. I'm not certainly don't. And I don't see it in that utopian way. I mean, the game is a bit rigged, and that makes it harder. But you can still take ownership for your own vision of life.
Oh, 100%.
So that.
I think it all sits with that ownership first and foremost.
When I finished the book, the editor said to me, could I encapsulate the wisdom I'd gained from those 14 years of life. And that's what gave birth to the 6 rules for happiness that are in the last chapter of the book. Because the second rule is fully own everything that happens to you. That was the second rule. And so the 6 rules for happiness is what got distilled from those 14 years, and it's the rules I live by even today. First rule is build a foundation of self-awareness and constantly reflect on that and evolve that. You have to have that, otherwise none of the other things work. If you're committed to that, it's great. Second rule is fully own everything that happens. No blame, no excuses, no waiting and hoping. That's over. Third rule is become your own observer, because you have an ability to always step outside of your character and notice what you're thinking and feeling without being consumed in it. And that gives you more space and possibilities and options for the choices that you make. Your choices are very restricted if you don't become your own observer. Number 4 is about building powerful, sustainable, purposeful relationships, because anyone who's had a really successful life, they haven't done it alone. They've had a lot of help and support from people who care about them, love them, support them, believe in what they're doing, etc., etc. So if you're not intentionally building those kinds of relationships, you're weakening your scaffolding. And number 5 is about proactive well-being. No one's going to look after you when you're having mental health issues, emotional crises, etc. You've got to find ways of managing and looking after your own well-being, even though there is help available to people if they do come into a crisis. It's risen the agenda, I think, very high in recent decade or two. And that's the first 5. And the last rule, number 6, only works if you're doing all of the first 5, which is all about how you look after yourself. Rule number 6 is find others and empower them to live in the same way that you are living in the first 5.
I love that. Probably number 6 feels the most important, but number 3 I most resonate with.
Right.
And I think those 6 values, they can never be all in order.
No, they all overlap. They all kind of intersect, really.
Intersect, but what might be, my number 1 for the minute is your number 5.
Yeah, exactly. They change. They change. Life is organic. It is changing. Buddhists say you can never stand in the same river twice, because the water's different and you're different.
Ray, it's been great to have you on. Thank you for adjusting your little internal compass headings over to us.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Guest Interview with Ray Martin, author of Life Without a Tie. Where to next? Well, how about I bring you along and we could see where the next adventure could be. The musical intro and outro is produced by Ornate Mosh. Interested in your own unique jingle? Connect via the link in the About section of this podcast. Thank you. You have been listening to You Are the Compass, produced and hosted by Jessie Clayton.